Welcome to episode 185 of Silver Lining for Learning. This is a celebration episode for our show. It's been 4 years. Before the show started, or actually right at the show, when the show got started in 2020, there was COVID coming, but there was no invasion of Ukraine. And there was no conflict between Hamas and the Israel, and there was no big messes. It was better, it was at that time. Now we think it was a mess, but it was better. 4 years is enough for most kids to graduate from college. I don't know, how much we've learned during this 4 years, but we now see a world that's crazy. It's by the way, we had just ChatGPT come up, that's kind of throwing everybody into their crazy ways. I think we don't know when AI might destroy humanity, tomorrow, or you might revamp humanity. We don't know all of those things. So during this special episode to celebrate that we've survived 4 more years, we also should know we have also grown 4 more years. Punya, our co-host from Arizona State University, has more hair on his chin. Now that's big progress. And Kurt, our co-host from Indiana University, has grown a lot skinnier, as Punya was talking about. And our co-host Chris Diddy from Harvard has actually not been a full professor for about a year now. It's kind of very interesting. And also for this special celebration show, we have invited our favorite guests. Well, everyone is our favorite guest, but there's a more favorite than other favorites. Okay, so sorry about that. And we have Ari, we have Pasi Sahlberg, we have Lin, and they will introduce themselves. So that's a good opening. Welcome back after 4 years. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor, and congratulations on your podcast. I cannot believe 4 years of podcast and 185 episodes. Congratulations to you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I want to introduce myself very briefly. I'm Ariadne, Ari for short. I'm from Mexico City, but I moved to Miami almost 3 years ago. I am the CEO and co-founder of two companies called Little Bookmates in Mexico and one that is called 311 Literacy in the US. Both of them are focused on fostering human connection and love for literacy. So we are all about the love for reading in children and how can they connect with their family members through books. And right now, I'm very, very happy to tell you that we're hosting an international reading tournament. So it's a tournament that it's for kids in the US and in Mexico. And we are going to give prizes to the children that read the most minutes in English and Spanish. So we have 1 more week to go in the tournament. We have 5,000 kids competing and reading every day. Up to now, children have read more than 500,000 minutes and more than 15,000 books. So with this, we're proving that kids and families can read together if you provide them with the right books. So I'm super excited to tell you all about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me back, and happy birthday to your silver lining. I think we should probably sing a little bit. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to. This is what I always do when there's a kind of a reason to celebrate. And also, Ari, it's wonderful to hear about your work on reading. There are very few more important issues these days than getting kids back to books and reading, and it's a very impressive work so thanks for that. Yeah, my name is Pasi Sahlberg, and I'm a professor of educational leadership at the University of Melbourne in Australia. I've been in Australia for 5 years. My work mostly focuses on education systems change. And as Young, you were talking about the COVID and the pre-COVID issues, and how all of us, we were talking and writing a lot about how COVID will change and transform education systems, or how it should do that. That's a big part of my work now, in that when we are coming to a kind of a post-COVID thing, to try to see and help education system leaders and practitioners as well to be brave enough to think outside of the box. What I'm seeing, and we can talk about this probably a little bit in this program, is that we all remember a couple of years ago when we were doing this reimagining exercise, that nothing will be same when we come out of the COVID, and everything will be reinvented and reimagined. But what I see now more and more in different countries around the world, that there's a big risk that we actually not only returning back to the pre-COVID thing, but returning back to the worst version of the pre-COVID thing, with the kind of old traditional ways of teaching and narrowing the role of students from what it was in the COVID, where the kids learn to take the agency and leadership of their own learning. That now I see more and more kind of as signals in the different school systems that this is not going to probably happen. So I think it's an important conversation. So it's a good to be here with you with this conversation. And Ari, you mentioned the competition or campaign that you have there. I'm also running a little campaign. I'm actually very proud of that currently with the Sydney Opera House. We are going to launch the first Australian Play Award for a school that comes up with the innovative new idea how to help children and schools and communities to return play back to children's lives. And this is particularly important, just like reading, a lack of reading. This is a big issue in Australia, the lack of play, outdoor play, and giving children agency and leadership of their own time. So we try to celebrate these things through the first ever Australian Play Award that will be done by the Sydney Opera House. But very, very honored to be part of this conversation and also learn from you this morning. Thank you.
So we have Ari and then Linny. So we have Pasi, Ari, and we'll rename Lynn Linny. We have 3 Finnish names maybe. But Lynn is joined us, and she'll jump in here in a minute, but I'll just say that she's got her background from Teachers College Columbia, then Kent State, then University of North Texas, where she was like a director of ed tech, and she's now a department chair at SMU, where she's doing great things on semiconductors, and she'll talk about that in a second, with interest in learning science, AI, STEAM learning, and many, many other things, innovative technologies in particular. So Lynn, would you like to jump in here? I don't know, sorry, I cut anybody off. I do have my 4th of July tie on, a little celebratory tie today.
No, I just wanted to say that Pasi had promised that if we'd call him back, he would create an original song for us. I remember that last time. So Pasi, happy birthday won't cut it. You need to, just as a reminder, it's on tape, so we can roll it if you want.
Well, thank you so much, Kurt. So actually, my nickname in China is Lingzi. Like you would know, right? We would add something ZI at the end. So Ari, Pasi, Lingzi, that could be my nickname. Thank you so much, Kurt, Chris, and Punya and Young for inviting me back to celebrate this 4-year anniversary with you all. It's really a privilege for me. So I thought I would have a few slides because this way I can speak faster. So Kurt asked me to share some news about my life here. First, I moved to SMU about 2 years ago. So I'm professor of learning sciences, learning technologies, and department chair for teaching and learning. So I wanted to share that my collaborators and I just received this very good news, actually, this Thursday, just 2 days ago, that our NSF iTest proposal was awarded. The updated title is quite mouthful. The original title was actually Learning Semiconductors with AI and Friends. But the current updated title actually it speaks what we are going to do. So we will develop a semiconductor curriculum and learning framework for high school students to incorporate AI game modules and field trips and hands-on experiences. I like to give credit to Poonam. I don't think I need to even mention. And also thanks to Poonam and his colleagues for developing this TPACK model. So we actually are using TPACK model as our framework, and we are hoping to advance TPACK model with AI and game-based learning activities. So this graph shows the projected activities and collaborators, including University of Maine, Fairfield University, Stimuli, which is a game-based learning company, and SMU. And I also want to use this opportunity to give a shout out of another project, which is a much bigger project that's taking place around me at SMU. We are very excited about this project. Most recently, SMU was designated by the White House to lead the Texoma Semiconductor Tech Hub, one of the 31 inaugural tech hubs in the US. So the goal of this one is to establish North Texas region as the global leader in semiconductors. And as you know, North Texas, there are a lot of big companies in North Texas, such as Texas Instruments, Lockheed Martin, AT&T. So the 31 designated tech hubs have just recently applied for phase 2 proposal, which so 5 to 10 of the 31 tech hubs will be invested between $50 million to $75 million. And so this graph shows the map of Texoma region, and you will see, there are about 35 members, including industries, local governments, workforce development councils. And the members came together just last month, submitted 5 proposals, overarching proposal, Fab Lab proposal, 2 workforce proposals, and 2 commercialization proposals. So at SMU, Dr. Sukul Nair, Jennifer Durak, Scott Douglas, JC Chow, who are professors of electrical computer engineering. They are the leader of the consortium. And Austin College, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and UT Dallas also are leading some of the components. So for me, I serve as the liaison from the Simmons School of Education. So I work with my colleagues to help with the digital platform, digital phablet, and the workforce development. So I'll be very happy to say more because we put months of work into putting the proposal together. And here I'll just show quickly 2 figures. The left figure shows the relationship and collaborative efforts between the industries, the universities, and workforce institutions. And right figure shows the career pathways that are being built into the Tech Hub. As you can see, going from middle school, high school, graduate programs, college programs, all the way to lifelong learning. And this is the map, shows the other tech hubs across the country. And this is the list of all the tech hubs. So just want to share this all just happened recently, and thank you for this opportunity to share this news. So I'll stop sharing here.
You all have news. Every one of you has news since you last appeared on the show, just in the past weeks, actually. So thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Ari. Thanks, Pasi. Who would like to start with any comments or questions for this week?
Well, I'll pick up on something that Pasi said about the fact that we had hopes of the pandemic offering a chance for transformation. And in many ways, those hopes have not been realized, but in some ways they have. We understand that people can have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm increasingly thinking that what we're seeing today in the world is organizations with PTSD and countries with PTSD and international organizations with PTSD, and that part of the craziness that we see in the world is reflected by that. And what happens if you have some kind of traumatic event in your life is that some people see the glass half full and they see it as an opportunity, and they take advantage of getting out of the box that they were in and reinvent themselves in a positive way. Not to say that that's easy or that PTSD is fun to go through, but if life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. And other people with PTSD kind of retreat. They retreat into their past, they retreat, emotionally and socially. They become very conservative. And we see that kind of bipolar response, I think, in the world, except that, unfortunately, more people are in the retreat mode than seem to be in the reinvention mode. And when they're retreating, the desired endpoint seems to be somewhere between the Dark Ages and the beginning of World War I. I mean, it's not just let's go back to the millennium. It's a lot further back and a lot darker image of what's happening. But silver lining for learning has never stopped, in part because we've never stopped finding really interesting and powerful things to celebrate. And those are the reinvention side of what's been possible. And particularly in global South countries, I just feel as if so much more is possible now than was possible before the pandemic. I get emails from universities across the world asking me to speak. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But I never worry, even in the most remote area, that we can't put a video conference together for a speech, because that infrastructure, human and technical, is there now. So I think that PTSD does fade, and that what we need to do is keep the torch burning for however many years we can, by celebrating the kinds of things that the three of you are doing, and that all of our guests have been doing, and that many others are doing, that really involve the best of the reinvention and going to scale and coming up with new models. And so I want this to be a glass half full show, even though it's a dark time in some ways, because that's, I think, part of our mission.
Can I continue from what Chris was saying, because this is very, very important. I think both you hosts and we here as your guests, we need to do exactly what you said, Chris, that keep the hope up there. But last year I had a rare opportunity to be one of the advisors for the or part of the expert small panel of advisors to the federal minister in Australia. So I had a very unique opportunity to visit. I visited about 125 schools in each state and territory in the large country of Australia. And in most of these visits, I always had a conversation with the young people, students, sometimes little ones in a preschool or elementary school, often the high school students. And what I heard from them all across the country was they were saying things like, COVID has changed me completely. They often say that COVID has changed us as young people, but it hasn't changed the schools. So they kind of experience that the world is very different for their life experience and learning as well, everything they do. But when they go back to their school, they see that the school is the same place with the same rules and practices and regulations than before. And oftentimes people ask me as part of my work where's the hope, or where's this optimism? And just like I remember, you have been talking about this a lot, about the power of young people. And my optimism is among these young people who had this insight. They had this like a real need for transforming schools. And I think that they were quite happy, many of them, during the COVID to realize and read some and listen to us and read some of our stories, that there will be a new school. There will be finally a different type of place for them to be happy and learn and do what they need to do in their lives. But now when the experience is probably not going to be that, I think we're going to have a lot of explanation to do with these young people, that why we're doing that. Let me take the Ari's example about the reading, why I'm so happy to hear what you do. Many countries now, most of the jurisdictions in Australia and even Finland, that is my home country. Now, when the kids reading PISA results and other national assessments are showing that kids are not reading anymore as they used to, the response is that let's teach them more how to read, to keep them in the classrooms. And I've seen this last year in many places. The kids are sitting in rows and columns, and teacher is dictating, whatever the teaching method is, I don't care. But this looks like a really boring way of teaching kids to read. Nothing to do with this library experiment, Ari, that you have been doing with your own kids and with others. That let's make learning and reading and mathematics, those things, fun. And I think this is going to be a major mistake in many systems if they think that by returning, keeping kids, storing them back in the classrooms and having one teacher teaching stuff that often the AI could do or technology could do much faster and more interesting ways. But these are the things that young people, we often don't pay more attention to this, that what the young people see when they return back to school now after the COVID, when they have months in Australia and here in the United States, years remote learning and different ways of kind of a self-directed way of making sense out of the world, when they are brought back to this old style of behavior in the school. And that's what I hear, and that's what I've seen in a grassroots level. But I'm still, just like you, Chris, said, I'm still optimistic. My class is half full, definitely, with this, but primarily because the young people and what they represent in our societies and in our future as well.
I wonder if Ari has a response to Pasi and what teachers could do to make learning more, reading more fun. And I know Linlin's got a interest in gamification, because we have a publication together in gamification. I wonder if you might want to respond after that. But Ari, you're in the trenches. You're doing this stuff. What can or what should, what's possible to excite the kids in this new age?
Exactly. So before COVID and up to 1 year ago, I was very focused on physical books, right? Because of the benefits that they have for the kids and for the families and everything. And now, since 1 year ago, I realized that we needed to adapt, because the only species that survive are the ones that adapt. So that's why we started this reading tournament with an online platform. So these are all ebooks. And what we're looking at is that if you incentivize the kids with amazing prizes, we're giving them laptops and tickets to amusement parks. And if you incentivize the teachers as well, the kids are going to read, okay? It doesn't matter if it's in the classroom or at home. They're reading a lot of minutes. And guess what? They're discovering different things, because what we want to do is for kids to fall in love with reading. Because if you love to read, then you can read to learn. And my idea is that if you want to learn about something, some topic, if you know how to read, then you will be able to learn it by yourself or with the teacher. But it's this theme of love to read, so you can read to learn. And I agree with Pasi, it's not inside the classroom. I'm not about read properly or read, the scientific method of reading. It's just love to read. This sensation that you have, this feeling that you have when you love to read.
I was just going to jump in. Thanks, Ari and Pasi. Lenin, thanks for giving me the opportunity, because I was really struck by the idea about what Chris talked about, PTSD of changes. Right now, for example, some of the institutions are trying to return to the SAT in America, right? You see a few universities now said, and they said, well, SAT now actually are better in identifying students, especially helping those from disadvantaged families. I don't know how true that is. Maybe institutionally, like Dartmouth, might be true, but not necessary for everybody. And I think that trend shows to me, not necessarily one test is better or worse, is institutions have basically are too lazy to reimagine new opportunities, new ways of identifying, admitting students. It's past, it's gone, but we are going back to that. Another thing, Pasi, I completely agree. I think in the US, I don't know how many of you are following this. I follow this quite closely. There are many states are trying to pick up something called the science of reading. There's not science of reading. They just made it up. It's just something like direct instruction of reading. I mean, the love for reading is the best way to drive reading. So we are basically make reading worse by teaching them how to read. I think Australia is getting worse. They're teaching synthetic phonetics, right? It's from Britain. I knew Britain used to export better stuff, but now they have to doing this thing now. But it's just really, I found this, Chris, you're talking about a half full glass. I'm kind of half empty because I look at these institutions, they work together to make whatever we learned worse. It's just I think pick up something, the worst version of education is one example. So I'm happy we're doing this show. We can, have people like Ari and Lily and Pasi come us to share with us what they're doing. But at the same time, I think we have to do a lot more in society to drive the right way of reading. I'm not saying reading is not important, but not necessarily by teaching them through the science of reading.
Lynn, you want to jump in here?
I cannot agree more. I have two examples. One example is with my older son. When he first came to this country, US, he was about 8-9 years old. He didn't know much English at all. And then he wanted to play games. And then in order to play games, he had to read. So he really read a lot of cheat books. And then that's how he got to be good at games. And that's how he got to improve his reading. So that's one example. Another is my youngest son. Actually, I was telling Kurt about that. He is in a robotic team. And one of the things that the robotic teams, the first robotics need to do is to create an innovation project. So their team work together. These are 5th grade to 8th grade kids, middle school kids. And they created these companion robots to help improve brain health. They had no constraints. They just went out there and then used all the AIs they could find to create music, to create animation, to 3D print the robots, and then to write up the engineering book. So to me, it's a lot of time is about solving the problem. It's about going to the basics, the needs, right? They have the needs, and that's how they got to learn. So they are going to the world competition now, by the way. So very excited about them.
So we should have them on the show. Before the competition or after they win it all. They're 8th graders, did you say?
They are, so there are 5 of them, 5, 6, 7, 8. They would love to be on the show. They are very good presenters. If we can schedule that.
So Ari, Pasi, Lynn, we didn't tell you this. You didn't sign in the contract, but part of bringing you back is to get your recommendations for future shows for year 5. So that's one recommendation. We'll try and get a couple more in the next half hour or so.
So if I can jump in here I want to follow up on that glass half full, half empty. And I have to say this, I've known Zhao since, when did we first meet Zhao? 92, 3, 4, something like that?
Well, 92, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so I've known Zhao for a long, long time. I've always seen him as a glass half full kind of guy. And it's kind of interesting to see in the last 4 years in these conversations, Young, to see that change in you. And I completely get it, because I also have seen that kind of a change in me. In fact, I was writing this blog post the other day, and I found this quote, and I'm going to mess up the name, but this is the French author, Houellebecq. Anyway, so he was asked early on during the pandemic, like, what do you think that will this transform? Because early, if you remember, when the pandemic first started 4 years ago, almost to the day, there was this thing, oh, we are going to come together. I mean, there have been so many science fiction movies which say when an alien civilization attacks us, that's where humanity is going to come together. This narrative of like Independence Day, right? And there was that feeling, there was this palpable feeling that yes, that we could collectively come together. And I don't think that those played out the way we thought it would. We were attacked by an alien, species, the COVID virus. And I think the results of that have been very mixed. And so he said this thing early on where he said, what do you think is going to be like once this virus goes away, and we've sort of thing? And it said, it'll be the same, only worse. And I read that and I said, like, in some ways, just being a pessimistic French guy might have actually nailed what the world looks like today, which is sort of where he started. And if you'd have asked me yesterday, in fact, I would have said I'm in the glass half full camp. But yesterday, I had a chance to be a part of these broader conversation that's happening around teaching and learning at ASU. And I was asked to lead a panel with students. And I had 4 students there, on the panel, 2 grad students, 2 undergraduate students. The grad students, actually, I had interacted with them before. One I know pretty well, one not so much. The 2 undergraduate students, 20 years old, 19 years old, 21 maybe, I didn't know before. And it was just this open conversation. And I have to say, I came back from that glass almost 2/3 full, because and exactly for the point I think, Pasi, that you're making, that Ari, you are making, that Lynn, you are making, that there is this energy and power in the youth. And I think what we are doing is denying them opportunities to be who they can be. So I'm in a it's kind of interesting. I was reflect on this, not just in the context of 4 years of the show, but also just having had that conversation, leading that conversation with these young people, sitting in front of a massive audience of 200 people, but being so thoughtful and articulate and nuanced in their thinking. So it's not that they're not embracing of change, but they're also quite reflective of what that has meant for their generation, what technology has possibly meant for them, the good and the bad. I actually came out very heartened by it. So that's a sort of change from, I think, where I was if you'd have talked to me at 8:30 yesterday morning. And I think all because of this conversation with young people and saying that, okay, they might actually be better at it than we would be, that we have been. I think, our generation and, really needs to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what have we left for the next generation to come? In some ways, I think that there is something to be said for that. But anyway, I'm just going on and on now. But I think the point I'm making is that speaking to the youth does make a difference and does help give a slightly positive spin on something where I feel sometimes pretty down about.
Punya, I'm sorry, I just want to jump in here, is that the 4 years, one thing that makes me feel is I'm going back to graduate school with you. So this is important. Punya and I, we went to graduate school together. We worked together at Michigan State University, and then we separated. But this show brought us back. Actually, so we are working the same place at parties. So it makes me actually feel pretty happy. And what I was really interested in this one is talking about the youth. I think in this show, we have brought a lot of youth. I'm very interested in highlighting the power and the potential of the future. You know, we have high school students, middle school students from Australia, Pasi, and from the US, from China, from Hong Kong. And I think they do show a very interesting approach. But one of the things we did not do well, I think, in this show is we always have them selected from schools. You know, they're always doing school things. Yeah, I'm sure, Paz, when you go visit schools, they will bring you the best students. You know, I always want to talk to students who hate schools. You know, and those students who are not selected, I don't think a school principal can typically go find a student who hates the school to be on our show. So maybe we should go do something on the streets, because I am really interested in the idea that today, with the technology, with the resources, with the connections, students can formulate a very effective, powerful global learning ecosystem if they have the opportunity. So Puneet, what you said is not denying them of the opportunity is very significant. I know Paz or Chris, you guys want to jump in? Yeah.
But you know, those kids who hate school, they are not there in the school. When I call there, they're somewhere else because they hate school. But you know, this recommendation, I commend you for giving a platform and microphone to young people. I think it's a great thing to see. Not too many platforms like this one do that. That you really not only invite kids to say something, but you listen to them and you know, build on their ideas. Maybe you could invite some preschool kids. It would be nice to see a silver lining learning with the preschool kids and just have a conversation how they talk about their future. But just like many of us, you know, we do a lot of keynotes and we are asked to, like Chris said, you know, give talks and presentations around the world. I have started to do more and more. You know, have responses to these invitations that I'm very happy to come and do a keynote or talk to you, but I'll do it only if I can come with the 1 or 2 students, anyone really from their communities or wherever these people are. And it changes the conversation entirely in the room when you are not talking, when you are not delivering a 1-hour keynote, but you speak maybe half an hour, 20 minutes, and then have a conversation with these young people. I had this experience in Canberra a couple of months ago in a National Gallery for about 200 or 300 people there in the room. And I went there with the 2 students and did exactly this, what I explained to you. And there was an interesting moment there. Somebody in the audience asked these students that what do you expect the school to teach you? What do you want to learn? And one of them was thinking for a moment and then said, we just want to learn how to think. And then she repeated that. So we just want to learn how to think about this very complex and complicated world. And there was a deadly silence in the room because, you know, this was really the killer line.
Well, I think that that's a great strategy. And I have used that strategy where it's been possible for me. And I'm always amazed. In fact, the challenge is to say something smarter than what the kids are saying under those circumstances. But I want to add in that part of what Ari is doing is informal. And because it's informal learning, she's able to get past a lot of the kinds of barriers that go on. And my late colleague, Clay Christensen, talked about disruptive innovation, where you do something that's off to the side and doesn't hit the normal barriers and reaches a population who's not well served by the current system. And then you get better and better and better and better. And all of a sudden, people are voting with their feet to go where you are. And I think that there are opportunities to start informal and to then disrupt the formal system, because head-on disruption of the formal system is a losing game. And I think a lot of the silver lining for learning things, if we were to do research on the belief system of the people that we've had on our other 184 episodes, I think that student-centered would overwhelm the number of people that are teacher-centered or curriculum-centered or assessment-centered. And that's a signal. That's a signal about what really works.
I think the next time we have an opening, we should all just go to our favorite coffee shops and sit down and ask a kid to sit next to us, and we'll have 4 different kids from 4 different locations to chat about life and education and schooling. So we've got one idea from Lynn, one idea from Pasi for a future episode. Thanks. Ari, I'm putting you on the spotlight. Have you got any suggestions for us?
Of course, because right now that we're running the tournament, there's a very small state in Mexico. That's the smallest state in Mexico that is called Tlaxcala. And the government of Tlaxcala embraced our tournament and really pushed it through their students. And so we have 2,500 students from Tlaxcala, from communities that you have no idea they existed. They're underserved. They barely have Wi-Fi. And the things we're hearing from the teachers and students are amazing. So, for example, there are students that are reading like 8 hours a day because they don't have teachers. And so instead of, doing nothing or watching YouTube or whatever, they're reading. So this is amazing. And they get Wi-Fi from one, government office that is not supposed to be providing Wi-Fi. So they're doing everything they can do to win this prizes. So they're reading a lot. So what I want to, my idea for future episodes is to bring people from underserved communities, people that don't have all this access to, technology and education, because you can find amazing students there and amazing people. So maybe bring those kids as well.
Sounds great. I think we can do that, actually. Will it be number of them speak English, or is that in Spanish?
So some of them are learning English. So we can do translation or whatever, but actually the part of the government in Tlaxcala that is pushing this program is called PRONI, and it's for learning English for their students. So we can absolutely do that.
That'd be real exciting.
I was wondering, Lin, Ari, and Pasi, over the past 4 years, how have you changed? When Punya and I were talking about changing half glass, to 2/3 of glass, a full glass, we don't know, how many, depends on how big your glasses are. It's just there. So how have you changed? I bet you have changed in some way. And so this is a good moment of reflection, like you were in the church of silver lining for learning. Just reflect on that and share with us. We can start with the Lin. You want to start with that? How have you, not your job, not your grant, but really how you view the world, how you view humanity? Because really big changes happen. We talk about the Ukraine conflict, the Israeli conflict, the rise of ChatGPT, institutional change, closing, come back, all those massive changes. Like Paz was talking about, the COVID has completely changed me. So I was just wondering about the 3 distinguished, our favorite guests. What do you think?
Okay, so since you called me, I think the biggest change for me is I spend a lot of time reflecting on my priorities. I think people around me are doing that too, just to see what's, some people, I think I'm one of those people who are kind of workaholic, sort of just keep moving on the work, on the job. And in the past years, maybe affected by people around me, maybe because of my age, I've just been starting to think more about, what are important for me in my life. I don't know, balance is the right word, but definitely thinking more about other things besides my work. And even within my work, what does that really mean? Is it just getting more publications, getting more grants, or what is the impact of my work? Probably, Ari, you realize that much earlier. I'm just starting to think about the impact of my work.
Ari, what do you think? What have you changed? Maybe you are always this positive, happy, doing great things, you know.
Yeah, but you know what? Since COVID, I learned to stop a little bit, enjoy more. You know, I thought about how fragile we are. And for the first time in my life, I prioritize the mental health of myself, my children, and my family over academic or work career, because I was always like the overachiever. And, you know, I wanted to have impact in everyone, but I always thought that mental health was not real, kind of. And it's real, it's super real. And we need to take the time to look at it and to really work on it, and work on it with our kids and with our family members. So that's how I change.
Yeah, I have a similar thing that both of you are actually saying, that you know, before COVID, I used to think much more kind of a planned things. I'm going to write a book or go to that conference or do these things in 2 or 3 years time. And I think what I've realized during these 4 years really is that the most important thing in your life is really time for yourself and time for the other people. And it's much more important to do those things that you want to do right now if you can, rather than plan them for the future. And you know, these relationships, human relationships, are extremely important, that you realize during the pandemic when you were locked down, and especially in Australia when this was a kind of a massive and widespread. I'm raising 2 kids of my own at the moment, and that's another thing that I think very differently about being a parent or father for them. Also in terms of this time, that I'm much more willing now than before to sacrifice work or some other things for the time if my kids want to go out and play or do sports or whatever they want to do than before, which is a very important lesson for me personally. But it goes down to this that you were also talking about. The time is the most important thing. Don't wait things to be done sometime in the future or tomorrow. Do them now if you can, and that's a very important. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
You know, thank you. I was just wondering about this, you know, the 4 co-hosts, and we've been doing this for 4 years. I would like Rain to say, what do you think, you know, have changed? How have we changed? You know, I think in 2020, when I emailed the 4 of you and the 3 of you guys, Chris and Kurt and Punya, to say, let's do a show, we did not plan for 4 years. And we did not really go through all this experience. To me, the big change, I think, Pasi, you're absolutely right. And you cannot really plan. I don't feel like that, you know, just, and I'm much more open to just changes. You know, things can change and things can happen, and they are real you know, how kind of fragile our life, you know, our life is, or whatever we thought was strong just suddenly changed. You know, one of the things, for example, now I'm sure Chris and Kurt and Puna will all feel institutional. There's a new generation of leadership, schools, and schools now, Pasi, you might run into this. Schools now are a lot more interested in dealing with the local issues. And there are many, many local issues they have to deal with. I don't feel like the new generation of leaders even have the opportunity to think what education can be. It's actually, that's very interesting. So I was just wondering, Chris, can we start with you? So what do you think in a big changes, you know, in your thinking?
Well, I feel as if before COVID, I was constantly fighting with complacency in educational institutions. You know, you develop something that would clearly be better, that's evidence-based, that reaches a broader range of students, that attacks some of the inequalities. And schools would just say, hey, we're doing fine. You know, universities would say, we're, you know, Harvard's #1. Why would you want to change anything? That kind of a complacent attitude. And one of the things that COVID has done, and I think it's for better, even though many times the immediate results are for worse, is it's blasted people out of their complacency. And we now live in a time when everyone has to constantly evaluate what they're doing because the world is so turbulent and disruptive and dangerous. My response to some extent is tailored by my age. You know, I'm in my mid-70s, and when I said to myself, we're past complacency, we're in a very turbulent and dangerous time, I thought of myself as Gandalf, and I thought of myself as Dumbledore, and Yoda, and the woman in the Matrix, and all those other sort of senior mentors, where I don't see myself anymore at the center of the revolution because I'm running out of road, but I certainly am enjoying seeing myself as somebody that sort of throws gasoline on the fire of what young people are excited about doing and changing. And that's been a shift for me. And frankly, I'd rather live in a world that's disrupted than a complacent world, because that complacency was locked into systemic inequities and failures that even now, even with all the half-empty stuff, we still have a better chance of changing than we did before.
So I'll jump in next. As many of you know, I previously had the moniker called Traveling Edman as my Twitter handle and as my blog before Silver Lining for Learning. And, when Young called us in for this podcast show, this very special episode in my life, in all of our lives, to join the band of brothers that we have here, I said yes right away, but I was a little nervous, so I went running before the first show to calm my nerves a little bit. I was in Portland visiting my son, and got the run in. And the next day I ran up Mount Tabor in Portland, which is a small mountain near where he was living. And I had my flight canceled the next day. I was going to fly home, and I kept changing different flights. They were all canceled. And finally, I got one that left earlier through Atlanta, and I got home in time to run that day. So I ran, and Governor Holcomb put a quarantine on us. So I said I could run during the 10 days of the quarantine, and I did during the 100 days of quarantine and 200 days. And then 100 days became a year, and people started following me on Facebook. So I started posting pictures every day of running with philosophical quotes to Facebook that I turned to a daily calendar on leadership, learning, and life with pictures and so forth. I got one this year and last year, some of my dog in Southern Indiana. So that's one thing that changed, that's obvious. And because of the podcast show, because of the calendar project and the running every day, and pandemic publishing, I call it, I really didn't notice COVID at all. I mean, it was a blip. I mean, I was doing stuff that was, to me, meaningful and purposeful and fun, and I got to meet Young and Punya and Chris every week. But you all probably, Young and Chris and Punya and Lynn probably recognize that I've asked people to come into my classes. I've had a couple hundred people over the past few years, mostly ed tech people, pretty well-known folks, come in to talk to my students. And I invited all sorts of former students to my classes. So sometimes I'd have 10 students in the class, but 30 people would show up because they're previous students. And, I value my friends, and I have thousands of them all around the world, but during COVID, I couldn't see them. So I got real sneaky in meeting all my friends by inviting them to be guests or inviting them to sit in on the guests that I had. So I'd send out an email to 100 people saying, hey, guess who I have? I got Chris Dede talking about AI this week. And, about 20 of them would show up. I get to see them. So I got a new way of sharing, a new way of socializing, a new way of maintaining kinship ties with my friends, with my relatives. We'd have Thanksgiving meetups of my relatives. So using synchronous technologies like Zoom and other means to connect with folks that, friends in Korea or in China or in Finland or in the UK or wherever around the world. So that's the big change, that I didn't have to fly there as Traveling Ed Man. I got to sit upstairs or downstairs or out on my deck or somewhere and meet up with all sorts of folks and people I've never met before. So my network grew, even though I couldn't use my official traveling Edman moniker to fly out and meet and greet folks. The keynotes that I was doing, that Young was doing, that Chris was doing, Punya was doing, no longer were face-to-face during the pandemic. They were virtual. And, you know, that was my slush money used to be to fly and meet folks. So I didn't have the slush money to go fly away, but I could bring anyone in on Zoom at any time. So again, that was what changed for me, was seeing that, you know, everything could happen digitally, at least for the time being during the pandemic, to maintain and enhance and find new friends all around the world. So Young, that's what I would say.
I like
Punya, go ahead, Pasi.
I like the band of brothers, but I would propose a new name for your band. It could be called Young Cha and the Thought Leaders.
I like it. You are excluding me as a thought leader. So Young and the thought leaders. That I like that how you are very careful. Okay, but Punya, go ahead.
No, Pasi, that's too heavy a weight for me to carry. You know, I'm going to give an analogy. When I was growing up in India, I had this very strong sort of faith in the power of education to open our minds. I used to, Ari, you would have loved me when I was a kid. I was a voracious reader. It didn't matter, it was the back of a toothpaste, I would read it, right? I mean, that's who I was. And one of my first sort of times of confronting that that's not necessarily true is when I went for my undergraduate, where I had assumed that just, you know, we were going to be, this is a pretty elite sort of an institution where everybody comes in is like kind of smart and they're well read. And I thought that we wouldn't bring sort of, India has a lot of hangups in its society, whether it's about caste, whether it's about religion, whether it's about all kinds of negative elements of society. And I felt that going into a place where there were going to be a lot more people who cared about learning, it would be a different world. And it was shocking to me, like in a few years, to realize that just learning didn't change some of that there were some of these biases which were so strong. I was shocked. I was like, it was sort of shaking for me a little bit. And then, you know, you move on with life and you think, okay, I think what the pandemic and what I'm seeing happening around the world, and I think Chris sort of alluded to sort of PTSD as organizations, as society that we are going through. I feel that sort of the same feeling that I had when I went from undergrad and I saw that there could be deep sexism, deep casteism, deep sort of blind, superstitious kind of behavior, even in highly educated young people, and how that sort of shook me. And now I think I just feel that times, I don't know, 100, right? That as that when I look at, and I think back on myself back in like 2006, 7, 8, when social media was coming out, when we had like the Arab Spring, this sense of hope, this sense that, oh, information, like the democratization of information can be a good thing. And then to see those same tools be leveraged by companies for surveillance purposes, for manipulation, by governments to manipulate people, to prevent them from actually accessing information, seeing the rise of sort of really fascist sort of right-wing movements using these same technologies. That's been very depressing for me, to be absolutely honest. It makes me feel really pessimistic about the world. And I've come to this adage, which is that, you know, I trust people as individuals. Something happens to us when we put us in groups, that we get these blinkers, or we get like really tribal in some ways. That is, given the pace of change, given the challenges that we face today, is not the right way to be thinking about it. So I'm sorry to be a bit of a downer in this, but this has been, the last 4 years have been really shaken me in some ways. That the analogy that I gave to my undergraduate, when I look at what's happening in India, when I look at what's happening in Ukraine, when I look at what's happening in Palestine and Gaza and Israel, and how we as a society are responding to it, how we responded to COVID, that where masking became a thing, that getting a vaccine became a thing that could divide people. And I'm sorry to be Mr. Downer here. So not much of a thought leader here, Pasi, more of the guy who is kind of, and I'm smiling as I say it, but to be honest, this has made me reflect a lot about assumptions that I made about technology and learning and how it can change people. And I have examples around me of how it has transformed people in beautiful ways, always, right? Those are always there. That's why we do what we do. But there are broader trends and things which really do concern me.
But
So,
Punya, you can be the bass player of the band.
There you go. Keep it down. Keep it down to earth. Keep it down. I can do that. Yeah.
So thanks, Punya, and thanks, Lini and Ari and Pasi, and congratulations to Lini for your grant, and Ari and Pasi for your competition. I hope the Sydney Opera House will never invite me there, but because I go in and get confused. But anyway, I can read the books. But this has been a great show, a great episode, a good reflection. I know I'm quite depressed. I'm honestly just what Punya described, not in the youth, but really in just one simple thing: why we haven't taught our children that we can live together. Why are we spending more money now building weapons against each other rather than helping each other? I think that's education's probably biggest problem. And we will solve that problem next episode, which will continue to celebrate our 4-year anniversary next episode. So join us next week. Thank you.